Well, hello there, my beautiful friends. Man, I miss you guys. I miss seeing you all each and every week. This every other week is kind of weird. It's so strange. But Michael and I have been so busy. I've hardly had a time to catch my breath, it seems. However, I am looking forward to just slowing things down and spending a little time with y'all today. I have a really cool project that we are going to be working on. I want to make some new cushions for the furniture that sits on my deck. And I have been seeing all these beautiful, gorgeous, French tufted mattress type cushions. And I thought, I wonder if I can make this. So we're gonna dive into that today. We're gonna give this a try, give it my best attempt. Fingers crossed this is gonna work out. So without further ado, y'all, let's head into the studio and start working on some French tufted mattress cushions. That is a lot of words to say. All right, friends, are we ready to dive into this project? I honestly don't know how ready I am, but we're gonna jump into this full force. So the first thing we're going to need is our fabric, and I have gone ahead and cut my fabric to size. We'll discuss sizing in just a little bit. You're also going to need a curved upholstery hook. This isn't a 100% necessity, but I do feel like it made the job a lot easier, so I do recommend investing in it. They're super, super inexpensive. You're also going to need a straight upholstery needle and some really good crochet, heavy duty crochet thread. This is important for the tufting. And then you're just going to need your regular all-purpose sewing thread for the sewing machine. You could make these projects sew-free. If you're not a sewer, you could do a lot of this in the glue method, minus the zipper. You'll just have to skip the zipper part. Okay, so let's talk our fabric here. So I chose my fabric sizes according to the existing cushions that were already in my chairs. So I cut them to size, like for example, this smaller cushion was 19 by 19. So you want to cut it 20 by 20. You want to add an inch, and then you want to add about 1/8 of an inch for the tufting. This isn't 100% necessary, but I do recommend it because the tufting pulls the fabric quite a bit. Then for the side pieces, because we're going to make a boxed cushion cover here. So for the side pieces, you're going to need the length. So mine are square for the small thing, but you're going to need the length and the width plus the size of your foam. So I'm using 4-inch foam, so I cut all of mine 20 inches long by 5 inches high. Because remember to add that extra inch. The other thing to keep in mind is your pattern. So for the side pieces, you definitely want your pattern to match. Like you can see here how my stripes match this way, because this is going to carry onto the side. So you want your pattern to waterfall over the edge and match. And then for the front pieces, you want to make sure that the stripes are going the same direction as your top and bottom piece. I hope that makes sense. I'm using a striped fabric, so it does make it a little bit easier. Flower patterns, you can cheat a little bit and they don't have to be perfectly matched. Okay, so the very first thing that I want to do, y'all, is put a zipper in mine. I like to use zippers because, first of all, I can't stand hand sewing, so we don't have to do a whole bunch of hand sewing to sew the cushion closed. And second of all, if you ever want to remove your cushion for cleaning, the zipper just makes that super easy. So to add the zipper, I cut my top piece a little bit longer. So I believe I cut mine at 22, and then I made a 5-inch, 22 by 5-inch piece for the zipper. And we're just going to attach these with a 2-inch seam allowance. You want to do a 2-inch seam allowance across this to make plenty of room for the zipper. And then we'll cut this to size after it is sewn together. So I'm just going to run this to the sewing machine really quick and do a 2-inch seam allowance across that. Okay, so I've done that. The seam is in. You want to make sure that you press it because you want that seam to be as invisible as possible. Like you could see mine, you could barely see it. So pressing it makes all the difference. Okay, so now I've got that zipper seam in. You can see here it's almost virtually invisible because I tried to match up my stripes as close as possible. That doesn't always come into play if you're using a super busy pattern where there's no pattern repeat and you can kind of get away with that cheating. But with stripes, you have to be a little bit more precise. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and pin in our zipper and get it placed and ready for sewing. You want to make sure that you have the right side of your zipper facing down into that seam. Otherwise, when you go to reveal the zipper, it'll be upside down and you won't be able to unzip it or zip it up. So make sure that your pull and your closure is facing down into the seam, and you just simply place the zipper on the seam. Now my zipper is a little bit longer than my fabric here, but that is okay because we can cut this. You just want to make sure that you cut it from the end part, the stop, the zipper stop. Don't ever cut your zipper at the top, at the pull. You always cut it from the bottom to length. I'm not going to cut mine just yet though. I like to wait until I have the whole zipper in, and then I will come in and cut it to length. So again, with zipper side facing down, we're going to place the zipper right on our seam and just start pinning it into place. You do want to make sure that you unzip your zipper a little bit, leaving about 2 to 3 inches at the top. This is going to make it a lot easier to do your finish sewing on the zipper once we get to that point. Okay, deep breath. Here we go. Let's get this pinned into place. So y'all, there are so many different ways to put in a zipper. I like this method because it creates a semi-invisible zipper. You could use an invisible zipper, but personally, I cannot stand them because the pulls are really tiny and they get caught all the time. So I just do this method by making my seam first, and then we sew the zipper into the seam. I am really careful here to make sure that all of my teeth, the zipper teeth, are perfectly lined up with that seam. You can see here how I pay very close attention to lining the teeth up to my seam, because when we reveal that, you want those teeth to be right in the seam, and it kind of makes sense. It's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Self-explanatory or common sense here. The other thing I recommend is to use a lot of pins because you do not want that zipper going anywhere when we are sewing. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish getting this pinned into place. I have my entire zipper pinned into place now, and at the sewing machine we're going to go ahead and attach our zipper to our fabric. To do this, you definitely want to make sure that you are using a zipper foot, and you want to start just below that pull. You cannot start above the pull or you're going to run into a whole bunch of issues. So start your sewing below the pull, and we'll sew all the way around the zipper and then come back and finish the top half afterwards. This is pretty simple, straightforward. You just sew all the way down your zipper using your zipper foot as a guide so that you get the same exact seam on both sides of your zipper so that it matches nicely. Now when I get to the bottom, when I get to my zipper pull at the bottom, because my zipper is a little bit longer than my fabric, I am going to stop just about an inch before the end of my fabric, because I'm allowing for that seam allowance, and I'm going to go back and forth over this with a lock stitch just to really give myself a nice zipper stop, because we're kind of creating our own zipper stop here, and I want to make sure that it is really well sewn into place. So I probably go a little overboard here, but again, I just want to make sure that this is not going to go anywhere. It's not going to tear or rip. When we use the zipper, I want to make sure I'm creating a good, nice, secure zipper stop at the bottom of the fabric. Now, if your zipper fits perfectly, you don't necessarily have to do this step. I tend to do it anyway, just to make sure that, I'm going overboard. I always go overboard. So once you get to the bottom, you just flip your fabric around and go all the way back up to the top. Once that is done, we're going to go ahead and lock stitch, do a lock stitch, always do a lock stitch at the beginning and the end of every starting and stop point. And then I'm going to go ahead and take this out. And now we're going to go ahead and finish that top part. To finish it, I do have a tendency to want to open up my zipper just a little bit more. This step can be a little tricky. It's kind of hard to open that zipper once it's sewn into place. It can be done. You just have to be really careful. So now we're going to go ahead and take this back to the sewing machine and do the finish. And we're going to sew the two top pieces into place exactly the same way. You just want to make sure that you are getting those teeth perfectly lined up with your seam so that you don't end up with a crooked zipper that will make it really difficult to open and close. So make sure when you sew your top flaps down at the top above the pole that you're getting it right on that seam. Pin it into place if you're not super confident with this, but I tend to just kind of wing it here. I don't always pin mine into place. I just kind of go with it and make sure I'm taking my time and going really slow to make sure that zipper pull is staying right on the seam. And just like that, we have successfully installed a zipper. So now we're going to go ahead and cut this to length, and I literally just match it up to the end of my fabric and cut. You do want to use really good sharp scissors to do this because those teeth, mine are plastic. I use plastic zippers. If yours are metal, they're going to be a little harder to cut, but I tend to use the plastic ones just because they're a little bit more cost effective. All right, now we're going to do the most satisfying part, in my opinion. We're going to go ahead and reveal our zipper. To do this, we're just going to use a seam ripper. It is very important that you use a seam ripper with a little ball, and you want that ball to be on the inside part. That ball is going to prevent our zipper from being cut or torn or pulled from the seam ripper, and then you just go right up that seam. Voila, just like that. And then remove all the little strings, and y'all, we have a zipper. I think this is the most satisfying part. I love this part, revealing the zipper. And then I like to just test my zipper several times. I open it and close it a couple times just to make sure that there's no issues and that I have it perfectly straight, because you don't want to discover that your zipper's not straight after you've put the whole cushion together. This is the time to discover that, because it's easy to fix it at this point. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead, because remember we made this just a little bit longer so that I would have extra fabric for sewing in our zipper piece. So I'm going to take that top piece of my fabric, match it up to the bottom piece, which is the zipper side, and then just cut this to the length so that the two lengths match. Make sure when you do this, you cut from the top side of your fabric, not the zipper side, because we need all that extra seam allowance at the bottom for attaching this and assembling it. And you also want you want your zipper to be inset enough on the back of your cushion for the tufting. That's really important in this step. Now, if you're not going to do the tufting, it really doesn't matter as much. However, if you wanted to edge band this, it's the same kind of rule. Make sure that your zipper inset is far enough in so that you leave yourself plenty of seam allowance so that your zipper doesn't end up too close to the bottom of your fabric. I hope that made sense to y'all. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and start assembling our cushion. And again, we are making a boxed cushion insert here, or a cushion cover, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and start by attaching all of the side pieces. The best way to do this is to line everything up. I like to set everything up, make sure my bottom pieces are lined up with the top and the bottom, and that my edge pieces are properly lined up. And you're going to start with a bottom piece. You're going to take a side piece, lay right sides together on this. Again, make sure right sides are together always. And then we're just going to take this to the sewing machine and sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance across that. This entire project is sewn with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That's why you always cut your fabric 1 inch bigger than you need it, because you're allowing for that seam allowance. Now, if you don't have if you're not using foam and you're pre-stuffing this, you don't necessarily have to do that extra 1 inch. But because I am using very high density foam for these, that extra 1 inch is very important when cutting your fabric. Okay, so I've sewn, sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. So I've sewn those two pieces together, and now I'm going to come in with my top piece and sew it to the edge of that side piece. Same thing, take it to the sewing machine, sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to come back in and sew our last side piece. I know this sounds a little bit confusing, but I will make a little diagram for y'all, and I'll have it available as a free download just so you can kind of understand the whole process. But basically, again, we're making a boxed cushion cover here. So you want your longer pieces to be in the front and your shorter pieces to be on the side. In my case, this is square, but it still matters because I want those, my stripes to match up. So now you're going to go ahead and take your last piece, sew it together, and then you're going to close those ends together to create a box. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about here in just a couple of minutes. So I'm doing both of these. I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera, sew them together, and making sure right sides are together. So here's all 4 of those pieces sewn together, and you can kind of see now. You can kind of see where I'm going with this. You just want to make sure that your top and bottom pieces are parallel with one another and that your side pieces are actually on the sides. I hope that makes a little more sense now that you kind of see the visual. So now we're going to go ahead and sew our top and our bottom on, and this part is a little fiddly. It can be a little tricky. The most important step, the most important thing to remember here is to just take your time with this step. Be patient. Make sure that you have right sides together, because I really don't want y'all to make the mistake I've made a dozen times and have to rip all this out and start over. So just always make sure right sides are together. I am using a homespun fabric here, so there really wasn't a right and wrong side, but I created a wrong side and a right side just so that I can always keep that rule playing in my head, right sides together all the time. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and sew this together. So I'm going to start with the bottom piece, which is our zipper piece. You want to make sure the zipper is at the bottom. And take that right sides together, and you're going to start attaching these with your corner all the way to the farthest left of your first seam. I hope that made sense. You could kind of see how I did that there. And then we're just going to start pinning all the way around. When you get to the end of that first top edge, it should line up completely and totally perfect with your seams for where we sewed the tops, or sewed the edges together. Okay, so I'm going to stop rambling and just kind of let y'all watch how I do this. I'm just going to pin the whole thing into place. I do think pinning or clipping here is very, very important, because you don't want any movement when you take this to the sewing machine. With our very last clip into place, before I just jump in and start sewing, I do want to make sure that I have all of my pieces properly placed and make sure I have enough pins. My clips fell off there. So you can see we have the beginnings here of a boxed cushion cover. So here I am just taking the time to double check and triple check that I have all the pieces properly placed and that I definitely have all of my right sides together so that I don't have to tear this out. I definitely don't want to make that mistake because it's a major headache. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and just start sewing this together. I'm going to take it to my sewing machine here. And again, I am doing a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around. This entire project is done in 1/2 inch seam allowance. I start at that very top corner and just start sewing all the way down, removing my clips as I go. This process is one where you kind of want to take your time, make sure that everything is staying really well lined up with one another. Now, when you get to that corner, this is going to be the corner piece. This is where our, that boxed corner is going to come into play. Again, I'm probably overboard here, overkill, but I like to do a back and forth lock stitch on that corner just to make sure that my corner seams are really well secure. Another thing that kind of helps when going around those corners is to kind of take your piece and create like a little tent of sort of like triangle it together on the opposite side of your needle, and that just kind of helps go around those corners just a little bit better. So again, this is just a straightforward, I'm just sewing all around my entire edges with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, being really careful on those corners, making sure that I do an extra double lock stitch there just to give them some extra hold, extra security, just make sure they're going to be really nice and strong. All right, let's see how well I did here. So opening this up, we should have a really nice box of sorts. It's looking good so far. So at this point, I do like to take the time to, unfold everything, press all my seams out, make sure that all of my edges caught and that you don't have any gaps, or, like if you had a piece move on you and it didn't quite catch, this is the time and the place to look for that and make sure that everything is well caught and everything is sewn together. And look how nice these corners are looking. I did get a couple of little puckers in a few places. This is where my fabric moved right here. You can see my fabric kind of moved on me. It happens to the best of us, and that is okay. I'm going to go with it. I'm definitely not so much of a perfectionist that I would take this whole thing apart to fix that one tiny little pucker. I'll just put it in the back and make sure no one ever sees it. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and attach the top piece. This process is done exactly the same way. You just want to make sure you have right sides together. I'm sure y'all knew what I was going to say. What are we doing here? Right sides together. I feel so funny reminding y'all of that, but honestly, I've made that mistake and it is no fun to have to tear everything out and redo it. So I just like to be that little voice in your head that is always saying right sides together. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just clip this whole thing into place exactly like we did the bottom piece. Okay, y'all, so I have all of my clips into place, and again, I'm just doing all my checks. I just like to do my double checks, make sure right sides are together, make sure everything is well clipped. And I was just about ready to take this to the sewing machine when I went, oh my gosh, I forgot to unzip my zipper. So see, this is why you have Alicia's little voice in your head. Don't make the mistakes that I have learned from. Because I want y'all, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I want y'all to learn from my mistakes. So before you sew this part together, take the time to make sure that zipper is unzipped. Otherwise, you will not be able to flip this right sides out. So I took this over to the sewing machine, sewed that bottom piece or that top piece on exactly like I did the bottom piece. And yes, I made sure my zipper was open. And you can see here how opening it makes all the difference, because now I have an easy way to flip this right sides out. Once it is flipped right sides out, I again do that whole check thing to make sure all my seams are well sewn together. Everything is fastened properly, sewn together properly. And just like that, we have a boxed cushion, and I've gone ahead and put my foam in it. The foam that I used, I did find on Amazon. This is a 4-inch high density foam, and I will have it linked for y'all in the description box under our supply list. Okay, so you can see that I have, and I cut my foam at the size of my finished product. So my foam is 19 by 19. And you can see that I've got a lot of extra fabric around there, and that is because we are going to attempt to French tuft these. Now, y'all, I've never done this before. We're doing this together for the very first time. Never have I attempted this. And honestly, I don't really know what I'm doing. I did look for some tutorials. To be perfectly honest, I didn't find much. There is not a lot out there on how to properly do this process. And so I'm sort of just taking all the information that I could glean and going with it. I'm sort of winging it here and doing this a little bit blindly. So we do have some supplies that we need. We kind of went over those. Our curved hook, a curved upholstery hook, needle, straight needle. I am using a little tiny pair of pliers to pull my hook through because we're going to be going through that foam. And then what I ended up doing is creating myself a little template here so that I didn't have to use my tape measure constantly. And this is to help me inset. So I created this. This is 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch. The fold goes on the fold of my cushion. So you just place that there, and then this is where we're going to do our tufting. This is going to be our tufting guide. So then I place a needle here. That's my starting needle. And then this is going to be my next needle. And then you also do this on the side. So you place your needles across the top and across the sides. And I'm using my little template here as a guide. And now we're ready to go ahead and start tufting. Now, again, y'all, I'm doing this for the very first time with y'all, so you're going to get to see all my mistakes. But from what I understand, you want to go kind of like at a little zigzag. So we're going to start in one corner, zigzag up to the other pin, zigzag back down, zigzag up, zigzag down. And you'll kind of see as we start to do this. So to start, I am using a really long piece of thread. I just come in, grab a little bit of fabric, pull it all the way through, and then when I get to the little loop on the end of this, pull your needle, whoops, yep, pull your needle through that little loop and then pull it tight, and that's going to create a lock, like a little lock in the stitch for you, but it also kind of makes that a little bit invisible. It kind of pulls it into the fabric and makes it so you don't have a big ugly knot at the end there. Then we're going to go back into that same spot and push our upholstery needle clear up to that top pin. This was really hard to do, y'all, because I did not have a thimble, and I later discovered that they do make these really cool leather thimbles for doing this. So if you're going to try this, maybe invest in one. I didn't have one, so I was just using whatever I could find, and I did find that pinching the fabric together kind of helped. So you're just going to push that in till it comes out right there at that top needle, which is, I'm not going to lie, this was really hard to do. The struggle was super, super real here, and y'all can kind of see my struggle, but this is where those little pliers came in to handy. I pushed that up as far as I could and then used my pliers to pull it all the way the rest of the way through, and then you're going to pull this all the way tight as you possibly can. Give it a little tug. Then you're going to come back in. Give it a little tug again. We're going to give this a lot of little tugs. And you're going to come back in to that same exact spot. Go back in just a tiny bit off of that. You don't want to go in the same hole because it'll just rip through. But just a little off that. And then push it back through to your next pin on the side. I know my hands are kind of in the way here and it's hard to see. But you can kind of see that I'm going to go in here and I'm going to come out at that next pin. And again, the struggle. It's a little bit real, although I will say this does get a little bit easier the more you do this, and I did learn some tips and some tricks along the way, which I'll share with y'all in just a few minutes, but let's just watch me struggle for a second here. Okay, y'all, so at this point, I'm going along, and I'm looking at this going, this is really, really, really ugly. This looks nothing like the pictures I've seen. This just looks terrible. It looks sloppy, it looks messy, and I'm second guessing my entire decision here. Is this really what I want to do with these cushions? Because at this point I was kind of like, well, I could have just put some binding on this and made them look polished and finished, and because I had that beautiful boxed cover made, and then I'm like, yeah, what am I doing? What was I thinking? Because this looks really terrible here. However, not all is lost. I did discover along the way that there was a better way to do this, and I did some reading. I actually gave up on trying to find tutorials at this point and just did some reading. I just went on some blog sites and did some reading on this, and it's where I discovered, yeah, I probably wasn't doing this quite right. Clearly, obviously, I wasn't doing this quite right because it's not looking very good at this point, y'all. So, okay. But I went ahead and finished my first row anyway, just because I was thinking to myself, okay, I don't want to give up on this. And I want to just keep trying and keep practicing. So unfortunately, this poor cushion became my practice piece. And with this tufting, it's very time consuming. I won't lie about that part either. But you do want to do it across all four edges on the top, and then you come back in and do all four edges on the bottom. And I did find my little template here was very, very, very helpful and very beneficial, because it really helped me keep straight lines. So the more I did this, the more I worked on this, the more I fumbled my way through this, the more mistakes I made, the more I learned. So hopefully, if y'all are interested in making one of these, this is going to help you a little bit along the way, and you won't have to grieve through some of the same struggles that I did. So here's the top all done. This is my first attempt right here. Now we're gonna take a look here in just a second. I think coming up, yeah, maybe. We're gonna take a look at my second attempt. Here we go. Okay, here's my second attempt. This is what I learned, y'all. First of all, I learned 1.5 inches was way too much. So I shortened my template down to 1 inch. So I made it 1 inch coming in from the top, 1 inch coming from the bottom, and look at the difference here. You can see the difference. This is my first cushion. This is the first one I did. And yeah, see, I just went in too deep. I just went too far. And then this is my second one. And look how much better this is looking. So, little tip and trick, 1.5 inch was way too much. 1 inch seemed to be the happy place here because it did start to look better. I started getting a lot cleaner lines. The tufting was looking better, and it was looking more like some of the pictures I was seeing, and I was getting a little bit more I was getting a feel for it here at this point. So, but the process was the same. I was still doing the same exact process. You insert your hook, pull through. And also another thing too is once I switched this to just doing a 1 inch inset here, it made the hook a lot easier to go in and to pull out. And I went and got myself a little couple of finger protectors. These are actually my silicone finger protectors for hot glue, but it worked really well here in this process as well. Another thing I discovered is after about every 2 or 3 stitches, it's really good to just come in and tie a little knot. So to do this, I just strung it through my fabric and then tied just, you know, your basic knot here where you go through one loop, go through the second loop, and then pull it really tight. My needle kept falling off my string a lot, but it was really easy to put it back on. It was no big deal here. And then just pull it. So I kind of feel like making those knots every so often is going to help prevent your tufting for just completely coming unraveled. That's the hope anyway. So to restart, you just go back in like we did that initial piece. You're just going to come back in that same exact spot, like right under the little knot there, and then run your needle through that little loop and pull it really tight, and it kind of gives you an invisible knot. It does kind of help hide the knot. You can see it a little bit in the finished project, in the finished piece, but it's still pretty invisible. Okay, so then you're going to go right back into that same hole, just off to the side a little bit, come back up to the top. Now, y'all, I did give up on the pins at this point as well because I had the lines going across my fabric, and I decided to start using those as a guide. And it worked really, really well. And it also kept my stitching in a nice, neat, straight row. So that is the other thing that I learned about this entire process is keeping your lines really straight is super key to making this look polished and making it look properly finished. Did I keep a straight line across every single one of them? No. My lines would start to get a little crooked after a time because, again, I'm not going to lie, this process was really difficult. First of all, I cannot stand hand stitching of any sort. And so this tried my patience a little bit, and it took a really, really, really long time to do this. So this is one of those projects I think that you want to give yourself plenty of time to work on. I attempted to make all 3 of these cushions. I made 3 of these, by the way, and I attempted to do all 3 of them in 2 days. I did pull it off. I did get them done in 2 days, but it was time consuming and I was tired and it tried my patience a little bit. So again, learn from my mistakes. Give yourself lots of time to work on this. But the tufting part, once I started realizing that you don't want a big fat seam, you just want a little bit, that 1 inch seemed to be the sweet spot. And you just basically are going in and out, kind of creating a slip stitch almost, if you will. But the most important part of this is to make sure that your stitches are equally spaced and that your line is really straight going all the way across. Okay, so I have come to the end of this, and now when you're at the end, Another thing to really keep in mind here is you want all of your lines to be equally spaced. So where I'm stopping on this side is exactly where I want to start on the second side. So I'm going to tie this off. I'm going to make my secure knots here to secure this into place, and I did about 3 of these, and then I'll start on that next side exactly in line where that knot is, and that's kind of the guide that I used. Now if you don't have stripes on your fabric or whatnot, I do recommend using the pins and making your little cardboard guide. Just make sure you do it at that 1 inch because that seems to be the sweet spot. Also, another thing that I would do differently is I would not add that extra 1/8 inch fabric, because this is what happens. So with my next one, I literally just cut that 1 inch bigger and it gave me a lot cleaner tufting. So did I take the second one apart and redo it? Or the first one? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Oh my gosh, y'all, my fingers hurt so bad. I feel bruised. I think every finger hurts, especially this one, because I actually cut this one not working on this project, but working on this project made it a little bit worse. And I had a Band-Aid on it for a while, but man, when I'm working on things, I like to feel and touch, and the Band-Aid was just keeping me from doing that. So I ended up taking it off and trying the finger protectors, which worked really well. So just a note to yourself, if you ever attempt this, get finger protectors and get some of those really cool leather, like I think they're called leather thimbles. They're like yeah, I think that's what they're called. I'll try to link some in the description box for y'all under our supply list. Anyway, my fingers hurt, and I am so glad that that project is over with. I didn't enjoy it, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna be straight up honest. I did not enjoy the tufting part of that entire project. It was so time consuming. It took a couple of days for me to get all 3 of those cushions done. The sewing part was a breeze. It was so easy. And I don't know why I felt like I needed to do all that fancy stuff, because it was so much work. And at the end of the day, I had to ask myself, was it worth it? And I was kind of like, I don't know. I do think that they turned out super cute. I'm going to enjoy them. I mean, they are a true labor of love. So I know that we're going to enjoy them. I just think it's one of those things that takes a tremendous amount of practice to get it just right, because a couple of mine look a little messy in some of the places, but we learned a lot in this process, and they're done. They're done. They're out on the deck. They're styled. So let's go take a look at how they turned out all finished. Alrighty, friends. Well, what do y'all think? Give me your honest opinion. And honestly, I have so many questions. If any of you out there know how to do this and you have tips and tricks, please, please, please share them with all of us, because honestly, y'all, this project was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was so hard and so difficult for me to just get everything perfect and precise, even though I was measuring and using the pins. It was really hard. So if any of you out there have ever made these before and you've got some fun tips and some good secrets to share with us, please do so. Also, where the heck are y'all buying fabric these days? I have to admit, I miss Joann fabric so bad. We don't have a lot of fabric shopping in my area. And so Joann's was one of the, well, it was the only place that I had to go to buy fabric. And Hobby Lobby's got some nice fabric. Their selection is just so small. So y'all share in the comments, where are you buying your fabric these days? I'm not a big fan of online
fabric shopping because I don't know about you, but I like to feel and touch my fabric before I buy it. So the online shopping just seems a little iffy to me. So y'all, if you have some secrets of where you're getting fabric and you know some good places to get fabric online that are, trustworthy and have a good selection, please share that in the comments below as well. Okay, friends, well, we did it. We made some French tufted cushions. They may not be perfect, they're quirky, they've got some flaws, but that's okay because I did make them with my own 2 hands and it was a labor of love. So I'm going to enjoy them and hopefully they last the whole rest of this summer season. I'm a little worried about some of that hand tufting coming undone, but we'll see how well they hold up and I'll keep y'all updated. I'll let you know at the end of the season how they lasted and how well they held that, how well that stitching held. So, alrighty, my friends, well, I am going to leave it there, bid you all adieu. Our next episode, we're going to be working on a really, really fun project. I cannot wait to share it with y'all. In fact, I cannot wait to get started. So on Monday, I'm going to get started. We're doing a great big giant room renovation in our house. It's going to be a fun project. Looking forward to getting started and looking forward to sharing the progress with y'all, or the whole process with y'all. So come back, see me again in the next one. Until then, y'all take care and I will see you soon. Bye, friends.